Hello, I'm Sean Williams. I'm one of the engineers who works with the dashboard server product for SquaredUp. Today I will be talking about the new VMware integration tile. We'll cover the basics on how it works, how to create a dashboard, and lastly, some tips and tricks. Let's get started. So before we jump into our first dashboard, let's talk about what the VMware integration actually is or isn't. First and foremost, it is a visualization tool for your vCenter infrastructure. In other words, this is a tool that allows you or your VMware administrator or app admin to visualize the core components that exist without needing access to vCenter. To be clear, while you can see an alarm or the state of an object, you cannot interact with that object in vCenter. For example, you cannot close an alarm or vMotion a virtual machine. And there are no additional alarms to provide additional alerting like SCOM does, the System Center Operations Manager. Speaking of SCOM, the VM integration does not require you to integrate with SCOM or with vCenter. No management packs or additional connections are required. If you do need additional monitoring, there are several third-party vendors that have VMware management packs. Lastly, the VMware integration is pulling data directly from vCenter via the SDK, also using HTTPS. However, the SDK doesn't have a SQL-like query language. So we created a direct integration to the core objects so that you can visualize them, but you can't easily issue a new query. So if you did need to do something additional, the PowerShell integration with PowerCLI does enable more sophisticated scenarios that you can implement as needed. So what you'll see here is the very first Getting Started screen. We'll click the Add Dashboard button and just simply add a tile to this dashboard. We're going to click Configure Tile, look for the new VMware integration under the Integration button, then VMware. And now we're just arbitrarily going to pick the grid. The first thing you'll notice is that we have to pick the provider. In this case, I already have the provider configured. We have to click our object type. These are VMware objects that are native to your virtualized infrastructure. We're going to choose folders, and then we'll be given a list of folders, and we're going to choose the default VM folder. This will be all VMs for your virtualized environment. We're just going to click through. Here we'll have a list of columns that are returned by default. If we click the Show Hidden Columns, we'll see all of the other columns that are available that are returned by this query. And as you can see, there are quite a few of them. We'll come back to these a little later. We'll click Next. You'll see other grid columns. You'll see that there's a road link, which we'll come back to also in the tips and tricks section. And here's our first tile. Before we start working with other tiles, let's take a moment to review the VMware object types. These object types are available on the scope blade. They're pulled directly from vCenter and do not include any object hierarchies. This means that child objects are not displayed natively within SquaredUp. Child objects are still returned, but you need to query for them separately. For example, if a VM has an attached data store, you will need to search for the data store separately. Additionally, objects will only appear when they make sense for the visualization. For example, you won't find snapshots when using the metrics visualization, since snapshots don't have any associated metrics. We'll review the metrics visualization in just a moment. Once you've selected an object on the scope blade, a large assortment of object properties will be returned. Please be aware that while I use the term property, these are not properties in the traditional sense. vCenter actually returns several metrics that are calculated on a per interval basis. In the vCenter terminology, these are called vCenter monitoring metrics in the Broadcom documentation. This can get confusing because vCenter also returns traditional metrics, but these are runtime monitoring metrics that can help prevent false positives since they are calculated on a per interval basis. In other words, performance spikes are usually rounded out. Broadcom maintains a list of these metric values. If you search for vCenter monitoring metrics, you should find the list of the available metrics. All right, well, we're going to continue on with our dashboard. This time we're going to go back to our dashboard that has the grid. We'll click New Tile. We will configure the tile. Go to Integrations, VMware, VMware Line Graph. You can see that we already have the provider loaded. If we had multiple providers, we could pick there. Next. This time we're going to choose our object type of virtual machines. We're going to click Folders. And we're going to choose a specific folder called User VMs that my virtualization administrator chose for us. Click Next. We get to the metrics line, and this is something that is configured by your virtualization administrator. So in our case, that being SquaredUp, we only have level 1 metrics activated. If your virtualization administrator has level 2, level 3, level 4 activated, you can then start to choose some of those metrics and report all those. Most VMware administrators only have level 1 and or level 2. Very, very few use level 3 or 4. So we filter those out for you. In this case, we're just going to choose level 1. We're going to choose CPU usage. And then, boom, there's the CPU usage. We can see that it's a percent. We can choose to add a percent label. And then we can turn that on or turn it off if we want. We're going to click Next. Here's our time frame. You can choose the normal things. This is very similar to what you have in SCOM today. Page time frame, specific time frame. Just be aware that just like SCOM, VMware has detailed analytics for detail monitoring for 5-minute intervals. If you go to the longer hour, day, year, so depending on what you pick on the time frame, details what comes back in the metric line here. Top end, we have threshold. So if you want to start to show things if they exceed a certain level, so let's go to the data range. We'll say percentage, so it goes to 100%. We'll change our display to 300. We're going to go back to the threshold and apply the threshold. It defaults to 90, and I can see that that particular machine almost made it to 90. We can fill above, fill below. These are all traditional SCOM options. Again, I mentioned about the data points. Right now we have a very small time frame, so we have lots of data points. We can also show the trend for the data, which is really nice. If we go out to the future, you can start to see that one of my machines will continue to grow. I believe it would be this one. So if we really project out to the future and make no change to the machine, it'll continue to consume resources. But these are all normal SCOM features or SquaredUp dashboard server features. And we have the value formatter here if we want to play with the format. The interesting part about the VMware integration is if you go back up to the line graph where you pick the visualization, the metrics provider is you can use for the line graph, for the column graph. It'll just switch. Let that load. You can do that for the spark lines. And we also have the bar graph. And again, these are linear metrics. So again, I mentioned in the last section where we had the grid tiles and we have aggregated metrics on the properties. Here are point in time, so you can do your own analysis if you wanted to. Cool. So what we'll do next is we will start to build a dashboard in just this next section. All right, so for our first trick, we're going to work with the grid tile. Now, the grid tile is kind of interesting just out of the box. You get some interesting columns, but we want to do more with this to kind of show some information that's actually useful. So in our particular case, I'm going to pretend that I'm an app administrator and I need to know what VMware tools are installed. I need to know at a glance what their power state is to make sure that they're on or off. And I want to know what host they're on. So we're going to go to our first tile. We're going to click the gearbox. We're going to go to the grid columns, and we're going to see that all of our grid columns are shown. We don't care about max CPU usage at this point, so we're going to hide that. We're going to hide usage. We like power state. We have uptime. We're looking for VMware tools description, VMware tools, which is actually the version. And I would like to see host name. And then we come up here and say hide columns. And this is what our grid looks like now. As you can see, we don't need connection state either because it's always connected. So now we know here's a list of our machines. Here is their power state, and here's their uptime, description of what the VMware tools is installed, and the host that they're on. Now this is for a particular folder, so we're going to just start with this. So we're going to start with uptime. So right now that is in seconds. That really doesn't do us any good. Let's change that to days. I'm just going to change the comment there. Hit the edit button. Come down here to the conditional template, and I already have a template to put in there, but we're going to take, it's just a JavaScript function, math.round, take the value, divide by 60, divide by 60, divide by 24, times 10, divide by 10, and you'll get, click off, uptime in days. Now, that's fine, and you can see that these servers have been running a long time. Now, if you needed, you could say, hey, I wanted to know what machines have been running for like over 200 days. So we can come here to default color, make everything green, add a conditional formatting, click the little mustache syntax, and anything that is greater than, and I want greater than 200, should be yellow. Let's actually make that greater than 350, because then we'll get some variation here. And we can see that we have 3 servers that have been up longer than 350 days. We'll click done on that. So that's good to know. So here we have power state. Everything looks to be powered on, which is good. But what we're going to do is we're going to click edit here. Again, we're going to make everything a default green. We're going to do a conditional format. We're going to come here and choose our value. It says server 1. And I know that if it is powered off, it'll have a value of powered off. And I'm going to turn that red. And we're going to click done on that. So right now everything's going to look green, but I'm going to change the target group in just a minute, which I have some servers that are powered off. We come to VMware tools. We can see that we have a nice description and we have the version here. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to VMware tools, the number, and even though that comes back as text, so we're going to turn that into a number. And you can see that it'll truncate unless it is a valid number. So 12.5, 13, and 13 is what our target is. So again, default color is going to be green. Additional, we're going to say, is going to be yellow if it's version 12. So if we want version 12, not 13, we're going to say that. We're going to add a second conditional. We're going to say red. Turn that off. There we go. And if it's less than 12, I want it to be red because now I know that I have to upgrade that. And there we are. So then I say, click this button here, and we have this. And we're going to then click done. So here we are. We have green for our status, which is your health status. That's going to come back from VMware. Power status is green because we know that it's on. Here's our uptime, which tells us that we need to take action because these servers are up for some period of time. And we have VMware tools, and we can see that we're out of date here. If I go back to our scope, and this time I'm going to choose all VMs. And this is our entire virtualized infrastructure. And I'm going to remove that user VM group here. There we go. Click done. You can see now that, let me publish this. I can now click on uptime, and I can see that there's a whole bunch of servers that have been up more than 350 days. I can click power state. I can immediately see what's going on here. I have 4 machines that are powered off. And then I can also come over here to VMware tools and do a nice little sort, and I can see what's going on with that. And I can see that we have a couple really old ones, and we have a whole lot of version 12s, and then even more version 13s. Now that we have our grid highlighted the way we like, what we'd like to do is add some interactivity. Now, since there's no link from VMware to SCOM, we have to create a pseudo link. I know, as a SCOM admin, that I have agents on these servers. I also know that those servers are virtualized. So those names are the same in both places. What we can do is we can actually create a row link on the grid that will, when clicked, take us to that particular object. What we need to do first is we need to grab our URL for our SquaredUp instance. So this is the one that I'm working with. If we do a search in the SquaredUp knowledge base for using object properties in the SquaredUp DS URL, it'll document for you that you then add a couple extra parameters. And then we have some crazy syntax that looks like this. So what we're doing here is we have the URL, drill down into the SCOM object, passing this particular config using this scope. The class ID is for the Windows class in your SCOM landscape. You can do this with any class that SCOM happens to be monitoring. We're then going to set a criteria where the name is like, and then the config name is the name of the column that we're going to pass. The problem with this syntax is that we cannot pass things unescaped. The URL does not allow that. So we have to actually convert these special characters to URL syntax. On screen is a quick little dictionary here. So open bracket is %7b, close bracket is %7d, etc. Space is %20. So once it's encoded, it will look like this. And it looks like a lot of gibberish, but it's just those special symbols then encoded. We then click Done. We click Publish. And now when we hover, if you'll notice at the very bottom, you'll see that it has a moving, so if we, the URL is different for each one. So if we click in support 2, it should go to bring it up in support. We click, and there's our server. So for trick 3, we want to take the grid tile and we want to pivot to the donut. A lot of the times people ask, which visualization do you want to start with? In this particular case, I always start with the grid, and then I can just toggle to the other visualizations. The same is true for the metric visualization. Start with the basic one, get what you need, and then pivot to the other ones. So in this case, we have a list of virtual machines. We're going to click the gear, edit your edit mode, and we're going to just duplicate that tile. I now have another listing here. I'm going to toggle to the gear wheel. I'm going to go to VMware Grid. I'm going to change it to Donut. And then here's my information here. I'm going to change my group because I want more servers to make the demonstration a little bit nicer. This is just the all VM folder. Go ahead and click Next. So here I want to do a count. So it will default to health state, which is kind of cool. Maybe what you want, but in this case, I actually want a list of VMware tools. And then I can see that I have a total of 73 machines and then a whole bunch of different virtualization tools. I click Next. I actually want to do it by label so that it sorts by none versus each different version. Click Next, Next, and then I want to choose General, and that'll give me a nice colorful donut. I click Done. So here's my original list, here's my donut. Click the split tile. I'm then going to clone that again. I'm going to drag it over there. Delete the extra tile, hit the gear wheel, go to data mapping, and in this particular case, instead of counting VMware tools, I am going to count the host. So we're just looking for host in the list. There's the host name. I can click Done. I know that I have 3 hosts in my environment. One host has 16 servers, one has 34, and one has 23. In closing, I want to quickly recap what we've accomplished today. You should now know what the VMware integration is or isn't for the SquaredUp Dashboard Server product. You should be able to quickly get information out of vCenter and format those values. Hopefully the URL encoding trick was neat, and if you have any questions, please drop a line to support@squaredup.com. I was your host, Sean Williams. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.